welcome, and thank you for joining me today. I'm so grateful to have you here, sharing in this space of growth, healing, and transformation. If you've already subscribed to Loving Everything, thank you for being a part of this beautiful community. Your support means so much, and together, we're creating a space where love in all its forms can be explored and embraced. As you listen to this episode, if it resonates with you, I invite you to like the video and share it with anyone who might benefit from the insights we're diving into today. These conversations are all about expanding our capacity to love ourselves, each other, and the world around us. And if you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to explore my other episodes where we journey into love's deepest, most unconditional forms. Each one is an invitation to reconnect with the parts of yourself that are waiting to be seen, healed, and loved. So thank you for being here. Let's begin. This morning. Thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to talk to you, and I really appreciate you being willing to share your history with us and share your story. So I'm just going to start really simple with, where were you born, or where did you grow up?
Yeah, I was born in Burns, Oregon, so on the other side of the mountain, but moved to Portland at 6 months, so really didn't know Burns or rural Oregon at all, but definitely grew up in the city.
So you've been in Portland your entire life?
Most of my life. After undergrad, I moved to Washington, D.C. for 2 years.
Okay.
And volunteered for 2 years to work with houseless, homeless folks.
Yes, you did. Okay, we'll get to that. What was it like to grow up in your family? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so probably two significant impacts on my family. One, both obviously parents. But my mom was an amazing human being, one of the most remarkable people I've ever met in my life. She basically survived a violent husband, alcoholic dad, spouse for her, and had 5 kids in 6 years. I was the youngest of the 5. And my mom definitely had a huge influence on my life in the positive ways. My dad probably not the exact opposite in the more negative ways. All my memories of my dad are mostly violence and him being drunk. He left. Parents got divorced when I was 8. Never saw him again. He died when I was 22. He was drinking 2/5 of whiskey the last several years of his life. So the good news was he inspired me to go into social work, and specifically in the alcohol and drug substance use disorder field. So,
is he still with us?
No, he passed away when I was 22.
Okay.
So he was 56, looking like he was about 86.
And did you ever have a relationship with him?
Never did. So it was an interesting group of 5 kids. My sister was the oldest, and she was real straight. My 3 brothers were all kind of the classical juvenile delinquents. And then I was real straight. So
you're the baby?
I'm the baby.
Okay.
And
so you watched all of that?
Right, and
were you conscious about, like, okay, so my sister's doing this and they're doing this and I'm going to do this?
Yeah, I was definitely had a lot of loyalty to my mom. My mom definitely, her strengths are amazing, and then her, I don't know if I'd call it a weakness, but just who she was, that generation from the Depression of, kind of the classic sorority girl, where the look good's, they're really important. And so for her, she definitely wanted me to be successful. And so I was always into school, sports, and kind of watched my brothers, kind of go other side of the tracks, and had no interest in doing that. And they actually, each one, introduced the next one to, kind of drinking, smoking weed. And when I went into it, they beat me up, kind of ironic, but kind of funny. And but back to why I never went to see my dad. So all 3 of my brothers would go visit him in the summertime up in Alaska, and just go up there, basically one big party, get drunk all summer, smoking weed, basically, a lot of sex. And then my sister went up there, and she lasted for about 2 hours, just because of how chaotic and crazy it was.
Yeah.
And I never had any relationship to my dad that, to speak of that was positive, where I think the older siblings did.
Yeah.
So,
So there was just no interest on your part to even go see him.
right.
Yeah. And you didn't really have a relationship with him because you were so young when he left.
Right. He didn't even know how to spell my name. He actually
Yeah.
spelled my first name with 2 G's at the end, which it's
Wow.
only one.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Okay. So can we go back 1 second? You mentioned how and I didn't want to skip over it. Did you say that your brothers would beat you up because
only once, but because I wouldn't kind of follow.
You wouldn't hang out with them and follow their lead.
Right.
Yeah. So they looked down on you for your decision or the fact that you led a cleaner life.
Yeah, they definitely wanted me to kind of
Yeah.
jump into that world. Yeah, I think
Of course.
there's partying has its
Yeah.
kind of culture attached to it.
You're making them reflect on their behavior, right? You're shining a light on that.
Yeah, I think in adolescence, it's all kind of wacky and all, but
Yeah.
I don't know there was anything purposeful about it. But there was definitely a lot of after my dad left, there was definitely a lot of violence between my brothers. And
Oh, there was.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And
Yeah.
how did that show up in the family? How was that dealt with? Was your mom, lenient with that?
She did the best she could, but
Yeah.
she didn't really know how to handle them. It was
Yeah.
My oldest brother. He had has had significant life problems. He and his buddy at 14 they were both older looking kids. At 14, they got fake ID that said they were 21, and ran away to Hawaii where my dad was living then.
Okay.
And so my brother, from 14 to 18, pretty much, was kind of in that juvenile justice, floundering
System.
world.
Okay.
And then he ended up getting diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
Okay.
And then I was 21 when he actually committed homicide. And
Okay.
so he's pretty much had, significant life problems, some substance use, but definitely a lot of mental health issues over the years.
Yeah. And how was that handled in your family?
Oh, you do the best you can. My mom
Yeah.
obviously tried to do the best she could, but
Was because you're in social work, was personal growth or development or therapy even encouraged and or open? Was your family open to change or?
oh no.
Okay, that's
Again,
what I was trying to.
kind of back to that.
Gauge. Yeah.
Kind of the classic: don't talk, don't trust, don't
Okay.
feel. So
Okay.
again with my mom, here's the perfect. I'm never going to say a bad word about my mom because she was
this
an
isn't
amazing
about blame.
human being.
Yeah, this
she
isn't about
raised,
blame.
My
Yeah.
dad never paid child support.
Yeah.
My mom worked full time.
Yeah.
And basically come home, fix us dinner.
Yeah.
I wrestled in high school. She never missed a wrestling match.
Yeah.
So she was just
She was an outstanding human being
Yeah,
for the circumstances that she was in.
Yeah.
We get that, yeah.
But,
But she wasn't perfect either. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so on the flip side, she grew up in like a stable upper middle class family.
Okay, she did.
And for her, that look good was extremely important.
Yeah.
So here's kind of the epitome of my family. My brothers would be, beating the hell out of each other.
Yeah.
She'd have to call the police to come in.
Okay.
And before the police would get there, she'd be trying to pick up, the carnage.
Okay.
So
okay.
so it didn't look bad.
Okay.
And that kind of, gives you a picture of, that side of my mom.
Yeah.
So as far as like processing any feelings, you didn't tell anybody, like, and how I lived my life was like, like I just shoved it down.
Yeah.
And I overachieved in sports, school.
Yeah.
And, and it worked pretty well as far as surviving.
Yes.
But I wasn't going to tell anybody I knew.
Yeah.
Finally, my best friend in high school, I shared with him,
Okay.
kind of the trauma. But yeah, I mean, I could tell you a story related to that if you want to.
Yes, please.
So I ended up having the classic born again experience at 18, and then
I had one in my junior high.
okay, yeah, and so but immediately got really interested in social justice issues, unlike many folks in that community, and I think maybe because of maybe how I grew up, and then I just felt like that was what Christianity should be,
Yeah.
and so I got really involved, like in hunger
Yes.
issues,
Yeah.
and went off to Oregon State, and I was a business major. Again, my mom geared me toward business, make money, be successful, look good on the outside.
Yeah.
And so I'm down there at Oregon State, and I take this one class, Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, and I'm like figuring like I don't really want to do business, and so I'm talking to woman who was teaching the class. It was like an experimental college class at the campus ministry. And she was telling me about, like, volunteer options. And so I ended up in this program called Lutheran Volunteer Corps in Washington, D.C. And I was pretty naive and just thinking all Christians are the same.
Yeah.
And so, I go back there and it's all these, like, upper middle class white kids from these, liberal arts schools,
Yes.
Lutheran schools where they
Yeah.
all were smoking weed, drinking in college, and I'm like, I didn't know Christians did that.
Yeah.
So it was this kind of, and I was progressive social justice wise, but, more conservative from like kind of theological perspective because I'd never been exposed to
Sure.
any, kind of more, liberation theology or
did you even grow up religious?
my parents were kind of like conservative Baptist types, but when my parents got divorced, we quit going because my mom worked on Sundays. So what I knew of Christianity, I didn't know what it meant at all. All I knew was that I was going to go to hell.
Yeah.
And so I wanted fire insurance, pretty much, for the born again piece. But yeah, so I got up to this volunteer program. I'm kind of exposed now to all these different people that I've never been exposed to, and part of the program is you live in community with other volunteers, and you all do social justice work. And so then you do like 3 retreats a year. And so our very first retreat is basically a family of origin retreat. And so you're supposed to share with your housemates basically 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21. And my dad had just passed away probably 3 weeks before that.
Wow.
And so here I'm
the timing.
Yeah, so I'm working with, houseless folks like, my dad never had really been homeless, but he definitely lived on the periphery.
Yeah, of course he did.
And
yeah.
So I'm thinking like, I'm not going to tell these people a thing about 0 to 7. I can start talking about, my life after that.
Yeah.
So I started talking, and pretty much just all that, angst, fear, trauma just came boiling out. And pretty much I cried probably for like 30 to 40 minutes. And these people are looking at me like, who the hell is this dude?
Yeah.
And I'm sure for them it was like, pretty like, huh. But for me it was like that first touching of that really deep scar and pain. And so it was
that was your therapy.
Yeah, it was like the start of, that kind of family of origin therapy.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely up to that point, you pretty much try to never tell anyone. And I told like probably 1 or 2 people ever in my life up to that point.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a profound experience. I'm sure emotionally vulnerable and raw as well.
Yeah. I felt safe with my housemates because they were really, really nice people.
Yep.
But it was definitely, I wasn't planning on doing it, and it just kind of came out, and then kind of led me on, the advent of trying to, do more family of origin work and trying to figure out, what was this demon that I was carrying around with me. Yeah.
And were you just not really aware that it was there up until then?
You're probably like, I think you just push it down so much.
That, you're just ignoring it. Yeah.
And
had you started using at this point yourself?
No, I've never been in.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not in recovery.
Okay.
I've never been an addict.
I apologize.
Oh, no, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
No, if you remember the normie part.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry.
Like I said, you can't look like more of a normie than me.
Than you, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was part of kind of that thing with my brothers.
You never used.
I've drank alcohol. I've never smoked weed. Never used, never used any illicit drug.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been drunk, but I drank like marginally in high school.
Yeah.
Then I had that born again experience, and I'll probably like a couple of drinks. Like a sip here and there, but mostly like I drank a little bit in my 20s, and then when my kids were born, my ex-wife, she was like probably misuse to, abuse kind of in that realm.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to give my kids like a different perspective, like, so like I got all of a sip or a drink. It's not like I won't do it, but I just don't really do it.
Yeah.
And it's like when I was younger, I definitely knew.
How did you stay away from it? I guess is my
it's just not an issue for me.
Okay.
Again, that kind of.
Because it was very accessible, right?
Oh, when I was younger?
Yeah. So it came along with core values that you hold, right?
Oh, especially when I was younger, like.
Yeah, because your brothers were doing it. So that's why I was like, well, what was that for you? Like, what kept you out?
I watched where they went, kind of the, all 3 of my brothers, like my oldest brother, like I said, he's had significant life problems. My middle brother, he basically dealt a lot of weed in high school, and he's actually the most functional, very
Out of the three.
yeah,
Yeah.
very very high functioning economically, very stoic guy, but been a great parent, so I really respect him for that. We're fairly different people. I'm on one side of the political aisle. He's on the other side. You can probably imagine which side I'm on.
Yeah.
Wearing the blue shirt. We'll give it away there. But I try and, just stay in a positive relationship with him. I think it's hard for people to deal with all that trauma when you're little.
Yes.
And there's very few places in life that we give people permission to do that.
I agree.
And like I'll give a perfect example. Like, so when I came back from Washington, D.C., I was closest to my sister, because she kind of helped. That's actually a sad story for me, but so she kind of helped raise me, And so I was like on this family of origin quest, and I came back and I thought, I'm gonna help my sister, to learn about all this pain that we had as kids.
Yeah.
And so I come back and I start telling her, she goes like, "You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. We didn't have any problems as kids." And I go, "Huh?" She goes, "You're just making this stuff up." And for her narrative was, we had this perfect childhood experience.
Yeah.
So I kind of violated the family norms of talking to my mom about it.
Yes.
And it was really difficult for my mom to share, but she said, when we were kids, pretty much most nights out of the week, she would drive us around for a couple hours till my dad passed out, so it was safe to come home.
Yeah.
So when my sister heard that, it kind of like,
Validated.
it actually did more the opposite. It kind of like upset her.
I'm
and
sure
so
it
it kind of
did.
like put a rift into our relationship.
I'm sure it did.
Which was
because
sad
you brought it up.
Yeah, and for her it was like her survival mechanism was just total denial.
Yes.
And and so like, and then she passed away. Like when and she was 47. So and we never really reconciled. I mean, we got along fine, but we never like had like
Yes.
like we're gonna talk about this issue.
Yeah.
And
So you've had to carry that.
yeah, it's like you do what I don't have guilt for it, because my intentions were.
No, why would you have guilt?
Yeah, my intentions were to like help her, kind of come to terms with what I was coming to terms with.
Yeah, but it never got resolved between the two of you.
Yeah.
And that's still painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've totally veered off topic, so let me catch it. Hold on, let's see. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be?
I don't think I'd change anything. I think I try and look at life as a journey, and like if I didn't turn out as a healthy person, I'd probably want to change a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I think my passion for the work I do, I think it's deep in my heart.
Yes, it is.
I think it's I think it's like I said, I think my mom, even though she's not like a social justice type person or what, she passed away now, but but she had unconditional love for her kids and definitely taught me service, and so I think like that part from her, and then seeing feeling the pain, seeing the pain from my dad and all his actions and my siblings.
Yeah.
I think that's where I have that deep quest to be of service to society and try and make the world a more fair and just place on kind of both a macro level and then also on an individual level.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wouldn't change anything, because I love, like, I love what I get to do in life, and I feel really good about, how I do it. Not to be, like, arrogant or anything, but
You're not being arrogant.
I feel like
You're amazing. What are you talking about?
I feel like I do it pretty well,
You do. You
And
do
so,
amazing. Yes.
Yeah, and so I think it's like my gift to be able to offer, and it's like I couldn't imagine like when people I graduated with, you often you work in this business for like 40 years, and it's like maybe you make a lot of money, but it's like, what kind of fulfillment is that?
Yeah.
For me, it's like to have a job. It
gives you a purpose.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah,
it makes you feel like you're contributing.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a larger way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feeds your soul and your heart
Yeah.
and who you are as a person. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely your mission.
You're right. Yeah.
This is totally your
Vocation, mission. Yeah.
Yeah, you
No,
found your mission
Yeah.
for sure. You can see how it lights you up, even when you were talking to my class about it. So, for those who are listening and watching, that's how we met. I normally talk about that, and I just jumped right into questions, but I met.
we can tell them if you want what I do. So I'm
Yeah.
the program director of Volunteers of America Men's Residential Center.
Okay.
So we're a SUD, Substance Use Disorder Residential Treatment Program here in Portland, and we're licensed through the state of Oregon. So we serve male-identifying clients who come out of the criminal justice system. And I've been there a little bit over 34 years, actually started the program in 1990, and it's been a gift every day.
Recruited to start the program.
Been a gift to do the work every day since I started there.
Yeah. So,
And at some point we'll talk about the scholarship too.
Yeah, built the program. Built the program for sure. Yes, we can definitely talk about the scholarship. Do you want to talk about that now,
Sure.
or do you want to talk about that at the end? Yeah.
Let's do it at the end because it'll stick with people better.
Okay, sounds good. Let's stick with your story. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so you've talked a little bit about this, but what was your path from childhood to choosing a career in social work and addiction treatment?
Yeah, so as a kid, I didn't have any sense of what I wanted to do. I remember as a little kid, like, I don't know if your Reader's Digest, if it was around when you were a kid or not.
Of course. Yeah, I'm 51.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
you don't look that old. Okay.
Thank you.
So readers, I just said that I read those Reader Digest stories, and they always had the ones that were kind of like the tearjerkers.
Yes.
And I'd cry.
Yeah.
But I sure as heck didn't want anybody to see me cry, and so I'd like try and hide it,
Yeah.
So I think probably I've always had that more sensitive side, but as a kid, and then I was like, into sports, wrestling, football. So you kind of like be that stoic, tough kid,
Yeah.
And you don't want anybody to see that weak side. So I didn't have like.
Was that was how you were raised too?
Yeah.
But that was also societally.
Yeah, typical generation,
Yeah, for sure.
1960s, 1970s kid,
Yes.
boy. And so I didn't know what social work was. And, like I said, my mom, her goal is have me go off into the business world, make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
She can tell her friends, like, Greg makes this much money, what my job title is.
Yeah.
And that'd be like.
Because she'd be proud of you, right?
Yeah,
and
status.
You're the baby. Yeah.
The status,
For sure.
moving up
But
the food
she
chain.
also tried with all of the rest. Like she really wanted you to succeed, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
My parents did the same thing. I'm the baby.
Okay.
Yeah, they threw all their resources at me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was always on that track to be like, a business guy. So what else can I study? I'll just go into business. And so I did the 4 years of business, and kind of toward the end of it, that's when I was really, kind of like when I got into college, started getting really interested in political, social justice issues. So I thought, maybe I'll change my major to poli-sci. My grandma goes like, you shouldn't do that. So I was a pretty conforming kid. Okay, I won't do that.
Wow.
So I didn't change.
That's how I was too.
Yeah. And so I finished the business degree. But like I said, when I got done, I had like no interest in going into business. And so I went off and did that 2 year of volunteer work.
And that's what really spoke to you and changed your life.
Yeah. And so I was like, I love the experience. I was like, basically working in a small community center, working with houseless folks and low-income families in Washington, D.C. It was just this powerful experience. And the director, he was a master's at MSW, master's in social work. And so that's probably the first time I, probably even knew what social work was. And so when I came back to Portland, my ex-wife and I, we were living up at Oregon Episcopal School as dorm parents. And thought, so they hired me like as a teacher's aide the first year. So I thought I'm either going to become a teacher or a social worker. And I was working with like first through fifth graders.
Uh-huh.
And the first through fourth graders are really easy. And I just got done working with these homeless, homeless folks, and having people pull knives on me, pull scissors on me,
now you're dealing with
threatening
kids.
me all the time. And I could pretty much stand up with these homeless people. But the first through fourth graders were easy, but the fifth graders, they were like pretty rude little kids. And I didn't know how to manage them.
No way.
Yeah, it was like pretty ironic because I just had spent 2 years managing
Adults,
houseless folks.
Yeah.
But that like. I don't want to be a teacher. These little fifth graders are too rough.
Yeah,
and these little rich kids.
Yeah.
But so I thought I'll become a social worker, and so I got enrolled in the PSU MSW program, And,
Interesting.
yeah, it's
That
kinda
was
funny.
the route. Okay. Okay, after studying business and working with the homeless in DC, what inspired you to get a master's degree in social work? And then how did you join VOA? Yeah.
Yeah,
How did
so
they recruit you? How did they know about you?
sure. Yeah, so I chose, like I just said, why I chose social work. So we probably don't need to go back there.
No.
But so when I graduated, at that point I was still, I was much more into the progressive part of the church, the social justice part. And so I had a strong interest in mental illness because of my brother being schizophrenic. And so I worked at this group home out in Washington County as a program director
Yeah.
for about 18 months. And it was like a Christian-based, group home. There were too evangelical for me, but really nice folks, really good-hearted.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 18 months. And then went downtown. If you're from Portland, Bologna Joe's.
Uh-huh.
You have to be old enough and be from Portland to know what Bologna Joe's was.
Yeah.
So I worked there for until it went bankrupt. And it was long story there. But I loved that job. It was a real radical social justice homeless agency.
Yeah.
And sadly, it went bankrupt for many different reasons. And then went over to what was then called Burnside Projects, now Transition Projects.
Okay.
And
TPI.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was working there, and then we had a corrections program, which I was running. And so the person at Volunteers of America, there was like a monthly corrections meeting with Multnomah County. And so I got to know the guy who was the director over at VOA. And so he in 1988, there was a corrections levy that passed in Multnomah County to build 3 40-bed treatment programs. And so VOA got the first contract. And so Dan was his name. He recruited me to come over and start working at VOA. And so I applied and got the job.
Wow. And you've stayed with them for 34 years.
Yeah, I was 29 when I started.
That is impressive.
Like I said,
How have you combated burnout?
sure. I've never gotten burned out from the work itself.
Yeah.
What I get burned out from is, and I wouldn't even call it burnout, but what I disdain is the bureaucracy.
Yes.
Because I think it takes away,
Yes.
when I spoke to your class, the term I've coined is the Soviet unionization of the United States of bureaucracy. Because, we have so much disdain for the Soviet Union back then and all their bureaucracy, but we become them. And I just look at all these layers of bureaucracy that have nothing to do with helping people. And I think we should take that money. And I believe that, I strongly believe in government, strongly believe you need, to have some regulation, but
Yeah.
the amount of regulation we have shouldn't be there.
Yeah. When it comes to treatment.
Yeah, treatment and, a lot of places in life.
Well, I just want you to.
But treatment, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk about treatment. I'll
Yeah.
keep it out of the politics. But and so I've shown up every day and loved the work. I truly believe it's a gift to be able to offer people the opportunity for recovery.
Yes.
And, you heard Jerome's story.
I did.
I believe what I love about recovery, and I'm, I believe everything from, harm reduction to abstinence-based should happen. But for me, I love abstinence-based because I think when people move into recovery, they get to become the person that they should be. And I look at a person like Jerome, and you see this, person when he was on the lifestyle for 20 plus years, he did a lot of harmful behavior to other folks.
Yeah, he did.
But in recovery, he's this amazing, loving, giving person and a phenomenal dad, phenomenal grandparent. When you see that gift offered to a person, and you see that transformation, it's as good as it gets. And nobody in my family ever chose recovery. We didn't talk about this. My brother died at 48, and his addiction, also some mental health issues, not the one I spoke of earlier.
Yes.
So one brother, the one who I spoke of first, he, who has been diagnosed as schizophrenic, he's still alive. But my other brother, he was the one closest to me in age. And we were very different people, but we were close because
he was right above you.
Yeah, he was kind of like the big brother.
Yeah.
My other two brothers. My oldest brother always beat me up as a kid. My middle brother was more distant, kind of that,
Did
stoic.
his own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas my other brother.
You guys were buddies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it was just tragic to see him. He committed death by suicide. And, and so when I first started in the work, I was kind of like saw the glass as half empty, and I'm going to work like hell to fill it up. And the longer I've done it, I see now it's like 3/4 full, and I'm going to work like hell to fill it up. because I've seen so many, wonderful success stories in recovery.
Yeah, you have.
And you still, and you obviously see a lot of, pain and suffering and not success. But what I believe is that for me, everybody wants to say, well, what's your outcomes? And I truly believe, you should be, accountable for how you do the work. But you're not going to get everybody clean and sober or crime free. But, if you give everybody the gift of the opportunity to be clean and sober and
To
really treat them with
see a different parallel life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then most of it hopefully sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You give them different modeling, right?
Yeah.
For their experience.
like, our clients, what I always say is, the way they grew up, life was not fair to them.
Right.
They grew up with families similar to mine where there's, early violence,
Yes.
trauma,
Yes.
mental, physical, emotional, sexual
Yeah.
abuse.
And no processing.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
No one to walk them through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No therapy, no counseling, no
Right. No
help.
Maybe no wonderful
no
mom
resources.
like I had.
No one to even notice that they might need help, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once you get into that lifestyle, it's like just pure chaos, and you don't know any different other than survival.
Of course.
You move into it initially to kind of that adolescent norm of partying, having a good time,
Yep.
and then at some point the party ends.
Yep.
It becomes that miserable life of survival.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'm familiar. Because some of us choose to, we choose to use that as a modification to the pain that we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think almost everybody,
Yeah.
nobody-
Whether we consciously or subconsciously,
Right.
but either way, we are choosing.
I think there's a few adrenaline junkies who love the lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I think most people, it's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're trying to put the pause button on their pain.
yeah. And
Yeah.
It's, and
Yeah,
once you
no
get there,
different than walking into a psychiatrist's office and saying, can I get on some kind of medication
Right.
to modify this,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, but not having the same kind of resources or tools
Right.
or I grew up in a family that personal development, that's why I asked you, personal development, and we didn't talk about stuff. And therapy was looked down on, right? No child of mine, there's nothing wrong with me.
Right.
My children, they're fine. So we were not really allowed to have problems.
Right.
And that was my biggest issue, is that I had to hide it.
Sure. Yeah, the family secret.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a lot of shit going on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
No, we
I
didn't-
wasn't doing a very good job of hiding it, by the way.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about all the shame that comes from that, It's like,
A tremendous amount.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
grew up with like tons of shame,
Yeah.
and it's that part where you feel less than others,
Oh, for sure.
and so I've been unpacking the shame for, the last
Yeah, me
40
too.
40 plus years,
For sure. Yeah. And you can hear it with anybody who has survived tremendous amount of trauma, and in addition to addiction. You can hear how much shame, because you get to a place where it breaks you. You feel
Yeah.
powerless in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel abandoned. Yeah, I think, that's what touched me the most in working with the unhoused community, is how people are so desperate for connection. They feel like they are the forgotten,
Right.
that we've all turned our back on them, and that nobody is there to help them, and nobody cares.
Right. And that's why I love
And
the
if
work.
they don't have any family,
No, right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's why I love the work that I do, because everything about our program is about creating a community of hope and hospitality.
Yes.
And we tell the guys, once you walk in the front door, you can be a part of this community for the rest of your life. And we have,
We'll always be here for
yeah,
you. Yeah.
and that's, I
It's
think
a
that's,
brotherhood.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's an amazing gift that, that we get to offer them, because they've been so broken by life, and they've done a good job at breaking life too. I'm not trying to say they're all, they're victims, but they're also victimizers.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like the term I've coined is compassionate accountability.
Yes.
I think, that all human beings deserve compassion.
Yes, they
but
do.
especially people that have been so broken.
Yeah.
But you also need to be accountable, regardless of what happened to you. And I understand why you do what you do, but it's not okay to do harm to others.
Yeah.
And so we're going to give you the skills, the tools, the hope, the sense of connection to be able to make that amazing change in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And if you choose to do the right thing, you get rewards. If you choose to do the wrong thing, there's consequences.
Mm-hmm.
But for them, there's so much anger, rage, resentment, all masking all that shame and pain.
Yes.
And once and they all come out of the correction system,
Yeah.
And not all parts of the corrections system are horrific, but a lot of parts
Oh,
of it are,
it is
very punitive.
horrific.
Very much of a one up, one down world.
It is terrible.
Yeah.
I speak from experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
It's the worst experience I've ever had.
Yeah.
By far.
And so I think we try and be that different place for them, and it may take a client when they walk in, maybe, 1 month, 6 months, whatever, to see like these people are different. But what I always say is when you walk out that front door, whether you choose recovery or not, I hope you feel like you've been treated like a human being, because I think the corrections, world dehumanizes people.
They
and
treat you worse than a dog.
Yeah. And that's,
a dog that you don't like.
Right. And it's so sad because, it's like you would hope, you would hope you'd have the most professional people working in that field, because you're going to deal with some of the, more damaged.
It's very interesting, the people that show up in that work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it burns out the good people.
Yeah, and I don't want to say all those people are bad in there, because there are some,
it burns out
people,
the good people.
But yeah.
But it's no different than working at a slaughterhouse. How is that not impacting you?
Yeah.
There's
much better than I do.
There's so much trauma happening constantly, even for the people who are in there, and everyone is dysregulated.
Yeah.
Everyone is dysregulated.
Yeah.
That was it's utter chaos.
Right.
It's absolute chaos.
Yeah.
That was my experience.
Yeah. I remember when my daughter was 1 month old.
And fear-based.
Yeah. My daughter was 1 month old. My brother was in jail over at Clark County, and we'd go over there to visit him, and we'd get there, try and get there early. 8 o'clock was visitation time on Saturdays. And it'd be pouring down rain, and they had this little lobby they could let you in to get out of the rain, but they make you stand outside because you're there to visit an inmate. It's like, you're really going to treat people that way? And then you get in there, it's real rude to you as a visitor.
Yes.
And I learned that lesson quickly.
Yes.
If you're going to do that, and I'm like, this, middle class looking dude, normally, with a nice little blonde haired girl.
Yeah.
If you're going
to treat me like this, then what are they treating these people
right,
like?
10 to 100 times worse, you know that. And, you hear all the stories.
Yes.
And it's like, so it's just such a sad statement of our society that we allowed people to be dehumanized. And,
yes.
And the folks walk in there
and
already.
they're broken.
Yeah, they already walk in broken.
Everybody that's in there is broken.
Yeah. Yeah, you obviously know it personally. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, the woman that was in the bunk below me couldn't get out of bed. She could not get out of bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. She got out of bed for food.
Yeah.
Occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It breaks people.
Yeah.
And it exacerbates whatever's going on with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if they haven't had any treatment or they haven't learned any personal regulation, they're just, everyone's fighting with everyone.
Right. Survival of the fittest, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's whew, it's an experience.
Bringing back some memories.
You're bringing it back to me. Let's get back to you.
Okay.
Okay, so what makes you the happiest, particularly in the context of helping others?
I think the relationship you make with people. There's been so many folks that I've worked with over the years that have become like family, and I totally get professional boundaries, and I'm all about professional boundaries.
Yeah.
But I'm more about being a human being, and I think and that's why I try and create a community of hope and hospitality. You always keep your boundaries in place in the sense of being professional, not trying to do anything for your advantage, but connecting with people at a deep level, at kind of that sense of spiritual connection.
Yeah.
And then becoming family. I think for me, that's the most important part of this work, because I think we're such communal people naturally.
Yes.
And then when, violence, trauma, addiction, corrections, breaks people, it takes us away from who we should be. Mm-hmm. And when you see that recovery happen, then you get to be like family with people, and not every client who walks out the front door I'm going to be tight with or have some great connection with.
Of course.
But many of them who have been in there over the years are like family now.
Yeah.
And I've had several of them over at my house for dinner. You do all it's just
it's a community.
Yeah.
You've built a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in that part. That's the part that touches my heart the most.
And I guess you probably never feel alone.
Right. No. Yeah. Yeah, like this This Monday for lunch, I'm having a former, client. He actually worked for me later too, but he and his wife over for lunch.
Okay, great.
And
yeah, you're always in connection with everyone.
Yeah, you stay in that. Yeah, you stay in relationship. Stay in connection.
That's awesome. Okay, let's see. In your view, why does addiction exist? What are the larger factors at play?
Well, if you take it from kind of like the biopsychosocial, obviously there's the genetic component and then the environmental piece of, how folks grow up. So I think it's both, nature and nurture. I think obviously you have the capitalistic side where people can make a lot of money off substances, where there's nicotine to, the legal ones, nicotine, alcohol, now marijuana in some places. And then obviously the illegal ones where there's, in all those arenas, there's a lot of money to be made.
Yes, there is.
So that's part of the equation. Mm-hmm. But I think, again, if you had a really functional, caring society, I think you're still going to have some addiction in it. But I think the more trauma, the more brokenness you have with little kids, with people, the more you're going to have addiction. Because again, what we talked about earlier of that natural response to a lot of, horrific childhood experiences, trauma, people are going to use it to cope. And at some point, the coping doesn't work anymore.
Yes.
And then it's just that, straight line going down into, that,
the abyss.
The abyss, yeah.
Yeah.
What addiction does to folks. And, and you obviously get, people who range from the functional addict to, the clients I work with, the substance becomes their God. They're going to serve that God at all costs. Like my dad, when he was sober, he was a nice guy. When he was drunk, extremely violent. And so you see people who would, never do what they would do when they're, not intoxicated.
It gave them liberty to do whatever they were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Their shadow side to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of the unprocessed things, right?
Right.
Whether that's intergenerational trauma, right? That's how they were shown, or that's what they experienced. But either way, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think addiction's kind of both that macro kind of money piece and then kind of the micro trauma piece. Mm-hmm. And I do think there are some people who are just, genetically going there, and then some people who are adrenaline junkies and they love that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. They're doing it no matter what.
Fun. Yeah.
Didn't necessarily have a traumatic childhood, but they're partying.
Yeah, they're having a great time.
And at some point, there's bumps and bruises in that partying.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Coming into daily contact with individuals struggling with substance use disorder, what are some of your greatest insights?
I think people range in all parts of the spectrum from wonderful human beings to not very nice human beings that I've worked with over the years. Like I'll see some people get clean and sober. Like I do believe in like personality disorders, like, narcissism, antisocial personality disorder. And so I've seen like some folks get clean and sober and they're still pretty mean people.
Yeah.
So, like some people, like say, oh, it's just the substance that makes them who they are, And then obviously, two of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life, Jerome, who you had the honor to meet, and then Al, the guy I have the scholarship for.
Yes.
Those two gentlemen in their addiction were pretty much badasses, They did a lot of adult antisocial behavior. But in recovery, two of the most amazing, loving human beings I've ever met.
Right.
And so I think, I kind of I just view human behavior on that spectrum of, you can be this, self-actualized, loving, spiritually, focused person to, we can use clinical terms, antisocial, psychopath, narcissistic, or not very nice person. Our very first, we have a Jesuit volunteer.
High conflict personalities.
Yeah. We have a Jesuit volunteer every year who volunteers for us and does like our recreation program. And our very first Jesuit volunteer says to me, goes, Greg, some of these people are just not very nice.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, I go, yeah, pretty much you got it.
Yeah.
But, so I view people on that spectrum. And then I think, like I said earlier, I think the beauty of recovery is that the person gets to become who they should be. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's why I love the work, because, you're going to see that ability for them to become that whole self.
You're so special. Okay, let's see. What is your perspective on fentanyl and overdose deaths, and what role does society play in prevention?
Well, if you look at the pharmaceuticals, they have a huge play in where we've ended up, and then obviously money, again, back to
So
capitalism.
tell us about that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
obviously opiate
Expand.
addiction. Opiate addiction has always been there.
Yes.
And then in the mid '90s, Purdue Pharma, some of the other pharmaceuticals, basically
Yes.
manipulated the U.S. government, manipulated the medical, the doctors, other prescribers in the world, United States, to start saying, hey, it's safe to provide these prescription opiates, and pretty much created this whole market for millions of pills to come out. And so folks would have like a car accident, sports accident, life accident, go into the doctor, medical prescriber, and be prescribed
This non-addictive pill.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And like the MDs of the world, where my mom, they believe these doctors are God.
Yes.
And so whatever these doctors tell you,
Yep.
you trust them at all
My
costs.
dad's the same way till this day.
Yeah.
He will not take in any other information except for what his doctor tells him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, basically, roughly a third of people who get prescribed an opiate, if they take it long enough, will become physically addicted. And so you had this whole group of people becoming physically addicted. And Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family made, billions off this, evil empire they built up. And, and so finally in the middle 2000s, the U.S. government said, we got a problem here. We have way too many people being prescribed these, these legal opiates. And so we need to do something about it. So they started cracking down on the prescribers, on the pill mills, all these, companies that basically set up shop mostly in, Ohio, Florida, less regulated states. But they could just overprescribe. People would go in and buy, hundreds of these pills and then either resell them or use them.
Right.
So, basically they made that, kind of dried that market up. And so now you have all these, what would have been normies, who are now addicted. I'm having these physical, withdrawal symptoms. So now what do I need to do? Basically I'm going to go start buying heroin. And obviously heroin, is a tough place to end up if you don't have millions of dollars, because, at some point you're going to get, that physical addiction is going to lead you. Your insurance company's not paying for heroin.
Yeah.
They might pay for your Vicodin, but they're not paying for the heroin.
Yeah, yeah.
So now you're on,
it's an expensive process.
Yeah, so now you're like, how am I going to get this money? It's like, I can't afford to buy it, but I'm feeling, dope sick, having withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, I need it.
So they're going to go out and start, stealing from Fred Meyer's, first stealing from their, their parents or from the other, their spouse, their kids, whatever. And then they, start stealing from Fred Meyer's, from, Home Depot, from, breaking your car window in, my car window in. So you had that whole kind of increase in crime. And then obviously the fentanyl world got introduced, roughly 5-10 years ago. Like we always get about a third to 40% of our clients are opiate addicts.
Mm-hmm.
I think out of those folks now, we got 1 or 2 that are heroin addicts now. Mm-hmm. Pretty much fentanyl is just, it's so cheap. So, obviously it's so much money in it for, the suppliers. Even though it's so cheap, they still make, a lot of money off it.
I know they are.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Because the high doesn't last very long.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Tell us more about that for anybody who's listening and isn't in this industry and doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so every drug has its really sad, horrific side to it. But where fentanyl is a game changer is that, it's so powerful that you can, pretty much, I don't know a heroin or fentanyl addict who has not overdosed from fentanyl. And so people are being Narcaned.
Yeah.
Narcan is the legal, basically, drug that we use to
carry it around.
Yeah, to bring people back when they've overdosed from an opiate overdose. And so, but since the pandemic started, we've had 1 former client per month die of deaths of despair. And deaths of despair basically from, overdosing from drugs, death by suicide, or, it can be from alcohol too. But, it's just, you just see so much more death now. And, like the high school I went to here in Portland, Madison, now called McDaniel, I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, where 2 students independently, not together, both thought they were taking like an oxy, and
Yes.
both woke up, dead in their parents' house.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, the drug dealers, I mean, that's, pretty evil when you're going to lace an Oxycontin with fentanyl. And you have some 16, 17-year-old kid thinking, I'm taking an Oxy, going to, kind of relax tonight, party a little bit. And then they're dead like that because, they didn't know it was laced with fentanyl.
Mm-hmm.
So just so many sad, tragic stories for families, for individuals, especially for parents. I mean, you think about it as a parent, you wake up and your son or daughter is dead in your basement from, what they thought was an Oxy an Oxy, but it was actually laced with fentanyl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know. Is it Charlie's? I feel like it's called Charlie's Song. They're an nonprofit organization. Their son overdosed out in
Beaverton?
I feel like it's Beaverton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those folks are really involved.
Yeah, Charlie's.
I'm not
I can't
sure
remember
the name,
exactly the name, but yeah.
Yeah, and those folks have been really involved in prevention. So
Yes.
so you asked about prevention.
Yes.
And that's where you need to start. It's like
With the kids.
prevention's what it's all about. And that's why,
No.
the term what I say when I lecture and what I believe in is replace the war on drugs with the war on trauma and poverty, because we know how to help heal people and how to make life better for people.
We sure do.
And we obviously could redistribute the money from the billionaires and millionaires down to the masses if we cared.
Yes.
But we don't really care about poor people. We don't care about people of color. And so we just allow all this horrific things to happen to human beings.
Yes.
But I'm a huge believer in prevention work because I think,
Me too.
we do, we can wait on the scholarship, but we do like a speakers bureau where we speak about 50 to 60 times a year to middle school and high school kids.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah, and then we speak, obviously, Drum and I speak to university students. But we strongly believe that, all parts of our society should help do prevention work. And hopefully at some point we become more compassionate and more caring.
I hope. I don't know what to even say, and I don't want to get into politics, but I don't even know what to say about what happened this week alone, and how that's going to impact so many marginalized communities. But
People that know me probably don't want me to start on that one. So
so we're not going to totally dive in that, but we will, address and not pretend like it doesn't exist.
Sure.
But absolutely, I'm very passionate, like you, about being a light.
Yeah.
At this time. I, am also a board member of Tiger Turns the Tide. I have really been drawn in and am passionate about prevention as well, because I think that both have to exist.
Right.
Yeah, both have to exist. One can't exist without the other, but we really need more programs for prevention.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's
and
prevention.
Educating our kids about the trauma that they've experienced.
Yeah.
That's what I feel really passionate about.
Educate them now and then build the programs to prevent it.
Yes.
It's a both and.
Yes.
All this work is a both and. It's like we do the prevention to educate the kids who've experienced the trauma.
Yes.
We build the programs in
Yes.
so kids don't have to experience the trauma.
Exactly.
We heal, try and continue healing the adults.
It's a continuum of care.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
We do the, harm reduction for the folks that aren't ready to change yet. We keep them alive, keep them safe. And then we get to do this abstinence space for those like me who love doing that part.
Right.
And so we have this whole continuum of care that we could easily do if we chose to. But we just don't,
some people are choosing to do the work.
Yeah.
We just don't have the funds behind us in the back end.
We don't do
right?
enough of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We definitely have pockets of it.
We meaning the government.
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Not us.
Yeah,
we're
right.
doing the work.
We're doing the work.
We're doing the work. Yeah.
We're talking on the macro side here.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay, you just covered that. So how can let me read this through. Let me make sure you didn't cover this too. Okay, how can we each examine and discover our own personal biases towards those with substance use disorder?
Yeah, I think folks come in with, historically there's been a lot of disdain toward people who struggle with, substance use disorder. Mm-hmm. And, again, it's those messages that we get taught. I think we've gotten a little bit better over the last several years with, taking away some of that stigma.
At least here in Oregon.
Right. Maybe other parts of the country not
Yeah.
as good.
Or at least here in Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a mixture out there. I think
it is.
there aren't too many families that aren't touched by it.
Yeah.
Whether you're the
Yeah.
millionaire
Yeah,
down
yeah,
to
yeah,
the
yeah.
houseless folks. It's pretty much everywhere. And so I think what I try and do with the guys I work with is just try and normalize it and take away that stigma and shame. And then I think you have to decriminalize it eventually, because as long as you make it a criminal issue, there's always going to be some stigma and shame attached to it, and there's going to be a huge desire for people to not be honest about it. And so if you can make it, I believe it's a healthcare issue. It's like we don't arrest people with diabetes for a PCS, possession of a candy substance.
Yeah.
But we arrest folks with substance use disorder
Yeah.
for a PCS, possession of a controlled substance. And I get that part of what I say is decriminalize drugs, don't decriminalize crime. So I think Measure 110 kind of took us in a slippery slope, because it was introduced during a time when you had the pandemic,
Yeah.
and you also had the George Floyd murder.
Yeah.
And so it was like, the police pretty much like, no, we're done, because of the George Floyd murder. You don't respect us. We're not doing our job
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
And the system was just kind of collapsing with
Yes.
the pandemic. So you throw Measure 110 in, and like, I strongly believe, I've spent my entire life, working in the social justice, social work field with houseless folks who struggle, and then with folks who struggle with substance use disorder. But I don't think we should have folks out smoking fentanyl in the streets. It's like, I don't think we should have folks being able to commit crime and have no consequences. It's back to that compassion and accountability. I'm going to
Yeah.
have compassion for you, but
Yeah.
I walk to work, it's a fairly stressful job. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3:30 in the morning and start walking, and after a while, it's like, I got chased a couple of times. I'll probably wait till 5:30 now to start walking.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't really like to change my life, but
Yeah.
I've changed my life a bit.
Yes.
Because of the number of people on the
Yes.
streets, where you have to figure out your survival of the
Yeah.
fittest. And I can run pretty fast. I'm getting a little old for that now, so don't run quite as fast as I used to. But
Right.
the adrenaline kicks in, you get going. But it shouldn't be that way, It's like, and I get that it's not going to be a perfect world out there, but folks should be able to feel safe going downtown where
Yes.
they want to go.
Yeah.
And so, it's like,
So how do we achieve that?
yeah, we take away that stigma. We decriminalize drugs.
Mm-hmm.
We give people a safe place if they want to use, but we don't allow people to commit crime in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And you build systems in place,
Harm reduction.
harm reduction, plus
Mm-hmm.
you build enough housing. Again, you're transforming your system of care to that you actually care about people.
Yeah.
And you redistribute the money, because nobody needs to be billionaires and millionaires in our society.
Yeah.
There's just way too much of that. A few people control almost all the wealth in the world.
I know.
And I think that's one of our biggest, challenges. I think it's why we ended up with Trump as president this week, because, both parties have sold out to the, to
Yes.
the oligarchs.
Yes.
Just the Republicans have sold out on steroids.
Yeah.
And but the Democrats are as guilty.
Of
The
course.
Democrats throw
Yeah.
a few bones to the peoples, but other than that,
Yeah, it's with
you
some
know.
celebrity endorsements that we're supposed to hear about. Yeah.
yeah,
that those people really understand what's going on the streets.
like
yeah.
Bernie.
And with the rest of us who are showing up at the grocery store and
Like Bernie was a politician that actually cared about both the working class and then folks in poverty,
Yeah.
and obviously the
and
Democrats.
that's why our younger generation stopped voting and stopped caring, because at that point they just gave up.
Right, the machine made sure that he couldn't get elected twice.
Yeah.
And that's because he's probably not going to pull it off, because it's pretty hard, with all the kleptocratic system that we have in place to really overthrow it. But it's like you look at, and this is just kind of human history. You look at 100 years ago with the robber barons, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Mellons. You had the same dynamic in place, and it took basically the Great Depression and World War II to reshape the wealth.
Redistribute it.
Yeah, redistribute it.
But they were also humanitarians.
Yeah, they are today too, to some degree.
There were more humanitarians. I mean, look at how Portland was built.
Sure.
Yeah. I can't remember the bubbler fountain guy's name right now, but
Yeah.
there were more, Nato Parkery,
Yeah.
his history is amazing. Who he was as a person was amazing.
Uh-huh.
What this city was built on in that time era was amazing,
Yeah.
right? So to me, it's also we've evolved into a culture that rewards wealth. And so I'm sure that existed 150 years ago, but
Yeah.
not to this extent,
Oh,
right?
no, yeah.
The level of wealth is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff Bezos is never going to spend all that money. He's
Elon Musk, you look at
they will never in their lifetime they couldn't buy enough things,
Right.
It's just ridiculous at this point.
And it allows for conspiracy theories to, and obviously with social media, now it's so easy to, to miss both disinformation and misinformation, but mostly, disinformation to manipulate people.
For sure.
I mean, obviously.
Well, because they profit off of it. Yeah.
The people in power profit off it.
Yeah.
The people, obviously the masses, you look at the people that vote for Trump. I mean, I think they range from, not very nice people to, some pretty nice people. And it's like, you can't really vote if you actually understand who the person is.
Well,
you can't vote for him because, like what I say is like, unless you're a white supremacist, a billionaire, or you believe, misogynist, and you think it's okay to sexually assault women, like you really wouldn't vote for Trump. But so most of those folks.
Well, let's not totally get sucked into politics right now. But you also have to realize that Trump is a brilliant marketer. He's an excellent marketer. And while the Democrats were very focused on villainizing a human being consistently and putting all of their money towards that, the government putting all of their money towards that, and all of the publicity, all of that money could have gone towards so many other things, right? And then in addition, he's a businessman, and he knows how to market himself. He knows his brand.
Right.
And so he was very successful. He was incredibly successful at recognizing that he needed to garner the attention of younger community. Right. And the working class. That's why he showed up at McDonald's drive-thru or wherever he was.
That was more mocking Kamala. Was that?
But it was also because he could touch that generation and say, I'm trying to understand. And he went on Joe Rogan's podcast so that generation would listen to him. Right. And we never, I'm not the Democratic Party by any means, but the Democratic Party just never went to that extent. Right. Their ideas were a little bit different. Right. They went about it very differently. So with that said, let's see. In your opinion, oh, you already counted that. Or you already commented on that. I'm jumping around. We really haven't talked about prison populations at all, and how that contributes to addiction, and the racial disparity in prison populations is so dramatic. How does addiction intersect with this disparity?
Yeah, so probably one of the most toxic things we've done as a society is the criminalization of black and brown folks, but especially black folks. Mm-hmm. The war on drugs is a fairly recent term in the United States. It's coined by Nixon in 1971 and funded by Reagan, but the most per capita funding was by Clinton. So it's a war on drugs on both, the Democratic and Republican side. And John Ehrlichman, who was Nixon's chief domestic advisor, said the real reason for the war on drugs was to demonize black people and hippies. And so that came out obviously after the fact. And so then, but the war on drugs, as far as its impact on people of color, has been, for over 100 years. Mm-hmm. Harry Anslinger, who was the first drug czar, was in that position from the 30s up until maybe the 70s. I mean, it was a long reign that he held that position.
What position?
It was called it was like the drug czar. I forget the exact title that he had, but it was at the federal level.
Okay.
And he was an extremely racist person.
Yeah.
And he used that. So essentially, that war on drugs, even though it wasn't coined.
That was that generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was around with the Chinese, in the late 1800s, with the opium, very racist policies back then. So those racist policies have been in place, but bringing us up to the more modern era. So in the 1980s, crack cocaine became this prominent drug, kind of the fentanyl of its day, but not as deadly in the sense of overdosing, but got the same media attention. The media, obviously, you go through these stages. So it's crack, it jumps into, like methamphetamines, back in the,
90s?
90s, more the mid 2000s,
Yeah.
like the aughts.
Yeah.
You couldn't pick up the Oregon without reading about methamphetamines.
Right. Yeah.
Then you get into the prescription and opiates and heroin, and then now fentanyl. So you kind of have that media hype. So back in the 80s, crack cocaine was a media hype, and basically it was used in all communities, but very very much used in the black community. And so in 1986, there was a famous basketball player by the name of Lenny Bias, a black man, who had died after the day he was basically drafted number 2 in the NBA draft, partied with his teammates, died actually from a white powder overdose, cocaine, but because he was black, they said it was crack cocaine. That was a popular narrative. So that summer, the federal government passed sentencing laws. If you have an equal amount of white powder cocaine, which is essentially really all it is you take white powder, mix it with baking soda, water, heat it up, and then it becomes crack cocaine, a little more potent on the crack side. And so basically, the federal government passed sentencing laws. If you have an equal amount of each, you have a 100-to-1 disparity of sentencing opportunity. And so from 1986 to 2010, when the Obama administration reversed it down to 18-to-1, you basically had just mass incarceration of young black men in the United States. 1 out of 3 young black men are involved in the criminal justice system in this country. Mm-hmm. And for you obviously know personally what it does when you put a person into prison. Mm-hmm. If you walk into prison as more, like many of the people I work with who are drug addicts, not criminal people at all. Some people I work with who are drug addicts, they'll tell you up front, I'm a very criminal person too. There's kind of a sense of proudness about it. But for those folks who aren't very criminal, you throw them into a criminal community, you learn how to survive, pick up more criminal skills. So you're doing a disservice by mass incarceration of people who have substance use disorder. It's like, what's your value in that? There's obviously a huge economic benefit for that whole prison industrial complex, and there's a lot of money in that world. Yeah. Both on the private level, not in the blue states so much where you have those private prisons, but you get down to the red states. There's a lot of private prisons, a lot of money to be made. Then obviously on both the county, state, federal level, a lot of prisons, jails, where there's a lot of money to be made. So that mass incarceration, of people of color, and so that was where the first harm comes. And then if you're lucky enough to make it out, you get back into your community. There's so much stigma and bias against you with being an ex-offender. The odds. People can make it, but the system's stacked against you.
Oh, 100%. Tell us how. Yeah. Keep going.
Trying to get a job, trying to get housing.
Yes.
I'll give a couple, and then obviously just the financial hardship on your family when you are incarcerated, and then the stigma when you come out. Oh, this person's a criminal.
Yep.
You're dangerous. I mean, Trump, he's a master. That person's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like the black, brown people. The folks trying to come up, to live here for various reasons, from other countries. But you stigmatize and shame people, and you make people fear them. And so we obviously have this fear, of criminals. And I'm not saying that, I strongly believe that, some criminals do some horrific things. I'm not one of those, people that's going to say like, I don't believe in, I do believe there should be prisons. I know some folks believe that, that you should have, I'm not one of those people. I think some people are dangerous to society.
Of course.
But
some people cause harm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And intentionally cause harm.
Right, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. My dad was a DEA agent in the 60s and took down Timothy Leary and the Black Panthers and went undercover and was a deputy district attorney. So I have, I know the
stories.
whole, did gang-related cases. So I grew up with all of this around me.
Okay. Yeah.
And saw that perspective too.
Right.
And that generation's way of handling it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
I'm with you. I believe there are dangerous people, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where we
but not everybody is dangerous.
Right.
And when we start naming people who are not dangerous. That's a problem,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you try and deny it, that's where we don't do ourselves favors, because then the people in the middle, and I think that's what's happened with a lot of these identity politic issues. When you shame people, telling them they're bad for being white or whatever, those folks are going to go over and be more likely to vote for Trump. And what I believe is you have to call it systems, but don't call it people pretty much. Unless a person has power like Trump, then I'll call them out. So I think it's a fine line there how you do that. But back to the criminal justice piece. So a couple of examples, like Jerome, when he had been clean for like over 10 years, phenomenal, doing phenomenal work, being of service to society. He went to rent an apartment and they denied him because of his criminal background. At some point, you got to say, like, you got to let this go.
Yeah.
And like, for people who, like where I work, people have to pass a criminal background check. So one of the things we do with our former clients is we'll pay their full tuition cost for up to 2 years in the Portland Community College Alcohol and Drug Counselor Program, because we want to give folks this opportunity to be of service. And so I've had like 10 former clients. Jerome was actually the first one to take advantage of it, becoming to do that 2-year program.
CADC, right?
Yeah, basically you do the program and then you can get your CADC after it. And so we had a former client probably 7 years ago now who he'd been clean for 3 years, safe enough to be there as a client, but the state of Oregon in their criminal background check said, no, this guy's not safe enough to be there as an intern. And it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You're going to discriminate against this, human being based on stuff they've done in the past. They were safe enough to be there as a client when they're still in their, coming out of their addiction. And now they're not safe enough to be there as an intern. It's like there's something that's, broken about that system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we went with that system, then I'm a dangerous person.
Yeah. And I get like, you do criminal background checks for folks.
I mean, I made some poor choices.
Yeah.
I made some very poor choices.
Yeah. We all make poor choices in life. And obviously people in addiction, substance use disorder are going to make more poor choices. No doubt about it. It's the nature of that life. But at some point you have to have, when you've shown like you've transformed your life, there has to be some point where like, no, this isn't held against you anymore. And, you don't want to. The more barriers you set up for people, the more you're going to break them, and then you're going to cause more harm to all of us. Like that person gets frustrated, angry, bitter. It's like, well, F the system, man. I'm just going to go back out and start getting loaded and commit crime again. And it's like, if you don't care for people because you have a heart, care for yourself and be selfish, and don't do this against people, because we're all going to suffer when you create these barriers to help people be functional. Like, hopefully people care because they have a heart.
Yeah.
But if you're just a selfish person, help this person have a better life, because your life will be better.
Yeah.
Our society will be better.
They aren't going to be breaking into your car.
Yeah. You don't have to be fearful.
Fentanyl.
You're not going to be paying your taxes.
Sense. Yeah.
It's expensive to put these people in prison.
Yes, it is.
Essentially that 08, 09 great recession that broke part of the criminal justice system, from the red states to the blue states. It's like, we don't have the money anymore to fund all these, mass incarceration. And for folks that haven't read it, read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, an excellent book on the racism of the criminal justice system and how it's, the mass incarceration of black and brown folks, but especially black folks.
Yeah.
Everybody in our society should have to read that book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how we would force everyone to read it.
Kind of a joke, but kind of serious.
Very serious.
Yeah, I mean,
it would be a profound truth for a lot of people, right?
I think if people understood.
Understood
the kind
if
of
they
the
were
history,
educated.
Yeah, because most people care.
Yeah.
I don't think most people vote for Trump because they don't care.
Yeah.
They just get manipulated.
Yeah.
And I think most people have a pretty good heart.
Yeah.
And want to do right by people.
For sure, and he's given them a lot of hope. Right?
Right. Manipulated a lot of belief with the hope.
He's given them a lot of hope.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. But
we know it didn't happen the first 4 years.
Right. But and we're not going to sit here and project out into the future, because none of us are fortune tellers. But yeah, I mean, we've all had our experience, and we'll just see how that happens. But he has definitely given them hope.
Right.
And because of that, no, I don't think that all of the people that voted for Trump are trying to be malicious. I just don't think that they fully understand everything at play.
Right.
And none of us do.
Sure.
None of us do.
Complex
None
stuff.
of us really know what's coming,
Yeah.
right? So, okay, let's see. Okay. Can you discuss the role of loving oneself after a life of addiction, and how do you see self-compassion as a core part of other people's healing?
Talk about it for like myself or for the other person or both?
As your experience of it, right? Because you haven't had to overcome addiction, but you've certainly watched others
Sure.
and you counsel others with it. And for those that might be listening who may be in a place of substance use.
Yeah.
Yeah, from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reflect for myself, and then I'll reflect kind of like for
Yeah.
the folks who are overcoming it, addiction, substance use disorder. So like obviously for myself, I can speak from my own. Like there's this dynamic in the field of like, people, for those of you who have never heard the term normie. So normie is a person who's a non-addict.
Right.
Somebody who doesn't struggle with substance use disorder. And so like I'm a normie, but I grew up with, a lot of trauma, a lot of violence, a lot of different types of abuse as a kid. And so out of that, there came a lot of shame. And I think there's a real parallel process to that for folks who struggle with substance use disorder. I think addiction just exacerbates it more, but I don't think it's like that uniquely different. Because I think shame is the underlying factor. And, but I think because.
Yeah, you touched on that before.
Yeah, and I think how that normie term gets put in there is, for me, I think my own bias is I think it's more of a class issue. Most of the folks I work with grow up really poor, but like you'll meet folks who are like millionaires who struggle with addiction.
Sure.
I don't think they have so much of the normie issue.
Well,
their
their experience of it, that was my experience of it. It's rich person's problem, right? It's like I got addicted to things because of the fact that I had access.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 And so, but I think most of the folks who I've met who are like, have more money or grew up pretty wealthy have less of those issues around normies because they don't carry that class shame. Like I grew up with class shame, and so I know what it's like to feel like you're one down to people being poor.
Yeah.
And I definitely grew up with a lot of other shame about a lot of other issues. So maybe that's my own personal bias about that class shame. But I think that's what I felt like with my clients, because like, what other healthcare issue do we have this thing about this doctor never had diabetes, they can't treat me. This doctor never had cancer, they can't treat me. But for so many people that, almost all the clients I work with grew up extremely poor. But it gets translated into like normie, non-addict, books, you're a book smart normie. And that book smart part says it right there, because being book smart, you're college educated and you think you're better than me.
Yeah.
So it's that shame about being poor, being non-educated. And I think, again, it's like,
how could you possibly understand where I'm coming from?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think to address like that shame, that stigma for people, like for myself, it had to be like, right, to kind of like start doing that work.
That deep inner work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I think grace is such a big part of it. For me, like I try and have grace for myself and try and have grace for others. And I think I've gotten better with myself over the years. I definitely was better with others for a long time. But it's like, here's one of the things I say to my clients, like, if you walk in here with a lot of hatred, because we get the white supremacists, and we also get other people of color that hate, hate other people at a pretty deep level. I don't think it's just white people that hate. I think all people hate pretty equally.
Yeah.
But, if you hate other people at a deep level based on their skin color, on their sexual orientation, on their gender, religious beliefs, whatever it may be, deep down you have to have a lot of hatred towards yourself.
Yes.
And one of the beauties of treatment, recovery, is you get to work on that self-hatred if you want to. And is it easy? Oh, absolutely not. Is it possible? Oh, absolutely yes. And it's like that's that whole recovery process. I look at recovery as, the spiritual journey in all parts of life, and not just around substance use disorder, but about kind of your sense of self, and that kind of deeper part of who we are. Like I said, my journey's been, for 40 plus years now, working on that pain from, all that trauma I experienced as a little kid to now, still there. But
it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. but
Yeah.
it comes out in a very different way.
It does.
You
It's
know,
informative.
Yeah, and that well, that's the beauty of what kind of the journey of recovery is, whether it's from substance use disorder or from life. That you touch that pain, and it's like, so I'll give an example, like where I even when I was in the field for a while, I didn't touch the pain. So like death and abandonment. So like for me, death and abandonment were like things like I'm sure so not going there, and and it's like I was probably like, what was I? About 30, running the men's residential center. And we had an intern. He was about 15, 20 years older than me. He had had a really rough life. We came through the PCC, Alcohol and Drug Counselor Program. We hired him to work for us. And one of his clients went out and died. He'd left the program, but he died. And so Bill was the counselor's name, and he came to me, and and I was a supervisor, and he came in to me to want to get support. And it's like subconsciously, like, I'm not going there, dude. I don't talk about death, And so I didn't provide enough support for him. And he told me, he goes, Greg, he goes, you've always provided enough support for me, but in this case you didn't. For me, it was a sad moment because, it wasn't like I did it on purpose, but I just wasn't able to touch my own pain. And it's like, wow, I got to start doing some work on this. So I started, trying to become more comfortable with death and loss. And I think I'm at the point now where I'm pretty good at it, but it took me a long time because, that was that part of that whole.
It's right there under the surface.
Right, that whole, family secret, and really what that, it's all about, abandonment, death, loss.
Yes.
Shame, all those things tied in together.
Yeah, swirled up in a nice little cocktail soup.
Yeah, and and so it's been this, continual journey of touching it, being comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And
knowing it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, knowing it's there and not trying to hide it.
Yeah. And so I think I guess that for me, like the parallel process of me taking that on and then being able to be available to support people that I want, that I'm, supervising my clients who go through it. I think that's that journey of recovery. And I think it just comes out in so many different ways where addiction, substance use disorder is so different in that it basically masks everything. If you can't touch anything because you're loaded, it's like it just, it keeps you at that, level where it's like nothing's real. And so when you basically get rid of the drug, the substance, at that point now you have to start, unless you want to become.
You can't hide it anymore. It's coming up.
You do get the phenomenon of what you call the dry drunk, and that's a person who, quits using substances, but they never touch that pain. And so they're probably not,
You call it a dry drunk.
You've never heard that term, huh?
No.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, no.
It's a pretty common term in the field.
Okay.
But the dry drunk who basically, gets sober but never touches their pain. Or not just pain, but their whole, inner self.
Unearthing. Yeah.
And so, but I think most people choose, that spiritual journey of recovery and do it at various degrees. Obviously some people do it really well, some people do it, so. But that's again like why I love abstinence-based recovery work, because when you start, until you become clean, you don't have the opportunity, to touch who you should be. And once you start touching it, it's not like life's going to be perfect, but it's going to be a hell of a lot better than the alternative. I've never met a person in recovery who said, I regret being in recovery.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of people who said, wow, I regret not getting clean sooner.
Yeah.
But the beauty of recovery is, man, it's like this gift of who you are, who you should be, it becomes alive again.
Yeah.
And maybe you haven't touched it since you were 5. Maybe you never got to touch it, but you now get to touch it.
Mm-hmm. And it's not frozen anymore.
Yeah. And it's like, I believe one of our, maybe our greatest gift, and for me, it's my greatest gift, is being a parent, because I get to undo what was done to me, It's like this amazing gift to be that parent that my kids deserve. And I love being a parent.
I do too.
Yeah. And so it's like, that's why I love, like, for my clients when they get clean, it's like, you see that parent, they get to be, and no kid should have to experience what, an addicted parent does, because it's so much pain and trauma. But when they get clean, it's like, wow, it's just that amazing gift. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, that sense of wholeness.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never going to completely repair it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you can't go back and change it, but you can at least let it breathe.
Yeah. And that's like, the thing I always like, talk with my clients about, 'cause I don't do a lot of direct work with them, but I do an orientation with all of them, and a couple of things I want to do is I want to get to know them as a human being and hopefully have them, get my sense of my commitment and passion to help them choose recovery. And I ask them a few questions, but one of the questions I ask, do you have kids? And about half of our clients have kids. And then I ask them a follow-up question. I say, you don't have to answer this one out loud because I don't want to shame anybody. But in your addiction, do you feel like you've been as good a parent as you would have preferred you could have been? And over the course of 30 plus years, I've had maybe 10 guys say, oh yeah, I've been a great parent. And almost all of them answer it. A few of them don't, but almost all of them do. And they say, oh, definitely not. And, it's like, and I just say like,
there's shame in that too.
oh no, absolutely. And that's why, I'm not trying to shame them, 'cause,
I mean, there's shame in
there's,
that.
yeah, tons of shame they feel. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. But then I just reframe it and I say, man, here's this gift you now get to go. And especially like, if their kids like, 1 or 2, I go, the gift you get to give your kid is they never have to know you in your addiction.
Yeah.
They get to know you in recovery.
Yeah.
I go, if your kid's 10 or 20, and maybe there's a lot of pain and hurt there, at some point, it may take 6 months, it may take 6 years, but they want you back in their life.
Of course.
Because, like I wanted my dad back.
Yeah.
We all want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Do you see that as a theme running through a lot of the people who are in this line of work, that we are all trying to undo what was done to us? Have you noticed that as well?
Oh, yeah. Not too many of us choose it for the money.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
No, I think, like when I lectured like to your class and other classes, probably 75% of the people come from, families that have been impacted by substance use disorder.
Yes.
And most people who do it have been impacted by trauma. And then that's the key is
and addiction.
Yeah. Substance use disorder, addiction, yeah. And that's the key is like, how well you work through your issues, because like we're all not going to work through it perfectly, but you meet a lot of people in the field that, like, especially in the old days, where they hadn't worked through their issues very well, and then there are some really inappropriate things that happen in the treatment field or can happen. And so it's really important, if we're going to do this work, that you continue to do your own work. And
for sure, because it unravels stuff, as we were talking about off air. Yeah,
and again, you're not going to get it down where you're like, have everything resolved, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's that part where, like, what I say is like, when the client comes, because in our work,
how are you impacting others with it?
Like what I always say is like, the folks we work with, you're much more likely to get an FU than a thank you, and you can't do this work for the thank yous.
Yeah.
It's really nice to get them, but you can't do it for that work. You have to do the work because you believe in it. But when you do get the FU, you don't want to respond back with the FU.
Yeah.
You want to respond back with that compassionate accountability, and you talk about like, if you're in a workplace, if you tell your boss stuff off, you're probably going to get fired. Now in our treatment program, we can have like a conversation about this,
I can
and potentially
show you unconditional love. That's what you're showing them, right?
Yeah, we can help you learn how to do it differently. And if it's like, there may be a consequence, maybe not, depending on how the FU comes out.
Yeah.
But we're still going to be here to try and give you grace, give you that second chance, help you learn how to do it.
Help you learn safety.
Yeah, safety for self and safety for others.
Yes.
And to deal with your emotional.
Because that was never modeled to you.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And no one's taken the time. No one's cared to show you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one's cared enough about you.
Yeah, we're going to have hope and belief in you because, society, like I love when the clients say, like, in both my 2 all-time favorite clients, Drum and Elbow, said, like, everybody else gave up on me, but you didn't. And that's, like, why it's so important for me. Like, Drum came through our program 3 times, and he goes, everybody else would have given up on me, but you didn't.
Yeah, you kept letting him come back.
Yeah, I think that's that amazing gift, the concept of grace, like, even though you don't deserve it maybe, but we're still going to be there to give you that second, third chance, and we believe in you.
Especially when your family's turned your back on them, their friends have turned their back, like they're at a dead end.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. How do you, let me take the time. If you could give one piece of advice for someone beginning their journey of recovery, what would it be?
think probably everybody, that's a tough one. I think have grace toward yourself. Realize it is a journey, and you're not going to always be perfect. But stay in your heart with compassion, self-compassion and grace, and realize that your life always will be better if you can, stay clean. But if you do use, don't beat yourself up. Try and get back on the bike, and there's so much.
And keep going.
Yeah, and keep going because all humans basically struggle with change, and obviously like folks who try and diet or exercise, most people get off that diet or exercise pretty quickly, but it's like obviously the consequences are much more severe for somebody who struggles with addiction.
Yes.
So don't just beat yourself up, but realize that it's a process, a journey, and have self-compassion and grace. Probably would be the most important parts.
Finally, what is your hope for the future of addiction treatment and community health in our society?
In community what?
In community health in our society.
Yeah, the part that I talked about earlier, I think decriminalization, where we make it truly just a healthcare issue, that we have that wide spectrum of services offered from, holistic opportunities to prevent trauma from happening, and then when trauma does happen, have prevention efforts, early intervention, and then the continuum for those folks who do struggle with substance use disorder, from harm reduction all the way through to abstinence-based. And it's just this prolific, healthy, caring, compassionate system that we have in place.
I think you should lead the charge.
The new drugs are.
Exactly.
And then I'll address one more thing if we can.
We're going to get to the scholarship next,
all right,
yes?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, please
Now?
do. Yeah.
Okay. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's the Al Forthan Scholarship. So Al was a client. He grew up here in Portland, was a 25-year heroin addict, had went to prison 9 times, black man, and pretty prolific in the drug crime world. People back then knew him very well on the streets. Had one of those reputations of kind of a kingpin, and had been through numerous treatment programs, always a treatment failure. Came to our program in 1992, and like I said earlier, for the first time he said, like, I feel like I'm treated like a human being and not being discriminated against as a black man. So for me, that's like, wow, that's what we want for our clients to feel. So Al chose recovery for the first time in his life. He was about mid-40s at that point. Pursued the alcohol and drug counselor program at PCC, and then in 1995 came back as an intern through that program at our treatment program, and became, in 1996, the first former client that I hired to work for me, and just an amazing, wonderful, loving human being. Just like you heard Jerome's story, Al was pretty much the other version, or the first version. Al used to go out and lecture with me to the students, and so I spent 10 years working with Al, and had so much respect and love for him. He was just this big giant man, and but had just like a teddy bear heart. But he could be back then it was like obviously a little bit more the old school world. But he always did it out of heart, out of compassion and love. But definitely some of the tough love, but just truly cared about people and just really connected with the clients and passionate about recovery. He had chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And we have this huge set of stairs in our building, and he had to carry his oxygen tank going up and down that stairs.
Wow.
And finally, we were able to build an office for him on the ground floor as it got worse. 3 days before he died on his deathbed, he was doing a 12-step meeting. I mean, that was his commitment to recovery. And so he passed away in 2006 with 14 years clean time. And I had the honor to speak at his service. And then that night I went home and thought, how can I honor this amazing, loving human being? So I created the Al Forthan Scholarship by taking $500 out of my pocket. And so it goes to Oregon high school seniors for kids who come from families that have been impacted by addiction. And the kids have to respond to a fairly simple set of questions. And then I try and...
I'm going to be judging this.
Yeah. Yeah. So we give at least one $10,000 prize and then all the way down to $500. So every kid who applies, and it's like, again, for one of those, kids who grew up in that kind of family, how difficult it is to talk about, these parts about your family.
Sure.
And so I want every kid who applies to at least meets a minimum criteria to get $500. But, I try and give as much as I can, depending on how much I can raise that year.
Yeah.
And so, the financial part, really, really important, but what to me is even more important is to have these kids like have a sense of like you're part of a community, because like for myself, a lot of these kids, I'll say like, man, I'm not telling anybody about this, and this is my first opportunity to share about what this horrific tragic family I grew up in with all this violence, trauma, like I always say,
like
no,
your experience.
exactly, yeah, like no kid should have to experience that, but way too many kids do.
I know.
It's like that's why I love this scholarship, because like
You're giving them back what you got in Washington, D.C.
yeah, and what I got from my mom,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like my daughter says like, yeah, I have 2 kids biologically, and then she goes like, the MRC and the scholarship are your 3rd and 4th kids.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so true.
Yeah. They're your babies. So how do people get involved? How can they find out more about the Al Forthan Scholarship? How can they donate?
Yeah, they can go into the Volunteers of America Oregon website, and you look up the Al Forthan Scholarship, and you can donate there, or you can get involved in many different ways, from being a scholarship judge like you're going to do. You can help read essays once a year. It takes a couple hours of your time. You'll read some amazing kids' resilient stories.
I can't wait.
You'll probably cry a bit if you have a heart, but you can be a part of that. You can link your Fred Meyer Rewards card to the scholarship, and you can donate cans and bottles. You can donate money, but yeah, it's like many different ways you can support us.
Get involved.
But definitely through the Volunteers of America Oregon website, Al Forthan Scholarship.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for sharing so much about everything that you've experienced your entire lifespan, including the last 34 years. It's been a really powerful story and really inspirational. I admire you greatly for everything that you've accomplished and what you do for other people. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us as well, and your experience of the last 34 years and how everything has changed and how we can move forward, hopefully. So thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been it's an honor to do the work, and been a pleasure to chat with you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting this podcast. Your presence here means the world to me, and I'm truly grateful for your time and energy. If this conversation resonated with you or sparked any questions, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing from each of you. Your insights, experiences, and curiosities always enrich this space. It's important to remember that trauma, often unseen and unacknowledged, can keep us from living fully in our joy. Through my intuitive healing process, I help release the weight of generational trauma, empowering you to reconnect with your true self and experience life in greater harmony. If you feel called to explore this deeper work, I invite you to book a one-on-one intuitive session, or even embark on a personalized journey with a Phoenix Immersion, a 2-day retreat designed to support profound transformation. You can find all the details below. For those who've liked, subscribed, or left comments already, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your engagement means everything, and I'm deeply grateful for the connection we're building in this community. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. I'm excited for all the healing and transformation we'll continue to explore together. As always, I'm forever grateful for you, and I cannot wait to see what unfolds next. Take care, and until next time.